The first time I found my mailbox smashed, I thought it was kids. The second time I thought maybe a drunk driver clipped it. The third time, I stopped pretending it was an accident. My name is Ethan Cole. I live on Maple Ridge Lane, a street that looks like a postcard and hides the kind of small-town politics that gets people mean in weird ways. This is the story of how a mailbox turned into a battleground, how a handful of people decided to stop letting one person use rules like a hammer, and how what started as a petty feud ended up changing the whole neighborhood, or at least making us ask some hard questions. The morning I found the first wrecked mailbox, it was just a mess of bent metal and mail scattered in the grass. I felt that squeeze in your chest, a mix of annoyance and embarrassment, like somebody had rifled through your life and left it on the lawn. I put it on the curb, taped it together, and told myself I'd call the HOA. That night, there was a neon pink violation notice stuck to my door. Mailbox non-compliant. I laughed, bitter, small laugh. Non-compliant, as if I'd committed a crime. I fixed the post properly the next day, poured concrete, bolted it in. A week later, it was ripped out like someone wanted it gone. That's when the quiet part of my life ended. If you've ever lived near an HOA, you know there's always that person who takes the rulebook personally. In our case, it was Linda Barrett, HOA president, neighborhood watchdog, and someone who loved the sound of her own authority. Linda had a way of making a polite request feel like a sentence. She wore her control like a jacket, and if you didn't button up, she'd make sure everyone saw you were out of dress code. She'd been on the board for years. She knew the covenants down to the punctuation, and she used them like punctuation in people's lives. I'd had 2 pleasant conversations with her about landscaping, about kids on bikes, so when the third mailbox came down, I knocked on her door, thinking maybe civility would solve it. She opened up with that tight smile and said, "Ethan, your mailbox is an eyesore. You should fix it." I told her I had fixed it. I showed the photos of the concrete, the bolts, and she looked at them like I was showing her a forgery. "You didn't follow the exact style," she said, as if style mattered more than the fact that someone kept destroying my property. That's when the tone changed. "We have rules," she said, folding her hands. "If you want to appeal, you'll need to file in writing. That's HOA speak for I win. There are ways to fight back that don't look like fighting." I started with evidence, neighbor videos, timestamps, a grainy clip from Tom Reyes across the street that showed someone in a dark hoodie around midnight. Sam Patel had a Ring camera and gave me the footage without drama. I went through the covenants, those dusty pages that sound official and sleepy until you realize they're court admissible. I called the postal inspector because tampering with a mailbox isn't just HOA business, it's federal. The more boxes I checked, the more the situation felt less personal and more procedural, and that gave me an odd kind of calm. Then I decided to be loud about calm. I built what I called the fortress mailbox, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I bolted steel to a thick post, poured more concrete than anyone around here used for a garden shed, and when I slid the shiny new box into place, I expected a shrug. Instead, people came out of their houses like it was a parade. Marge from 2 doors down clapped. "Tom took a picture," Sam said. "Man, you could hold up a car with that thing." I invited them to stand with me. We stood there, coffee in hand, and looked at a mailbox that was suddenly more than a mailbox. It was a statement. Linda came over the next afternoon with the HOA clipboard, like she always did when a civic spectacle needed deflating. She circled the mailbox, tapping her pen. "It's not the approved model," she said. "You didn't submit plans." I heard the whisper of a neighbor ask, "Is she really going to fine him?" And I felt the room tilt. I could have swallowed my pride and filed the form. Instead, I walked up to her and said, slow and flat, "You've visited my property 4 times since last month. If you have evidence I'm violating the rules, bring it to the board meeting." She smiled like she'd swallowed a lemon. "We will," she said. "If you think HOA meetings are boring, you've never been to one where the whole town finally showed up." The night of the meeting, the community center was packed, folding chairs, murmurs, the fluorescent lights doing their best to make everything feel serious. I had printed the packet, videos, timestamps, copies of the covenant, the works. Linda arrived in her blazer, like armor. She took the podium as if she'd always been an officer of the court. I listened to her read the rules, slow and precise. Then I stood and laid my packet on the table. "You called the postal inspector?" she asked, voice dripping caution. "Yes," I said. "And the inspector said tampering with mail is a federal offense. I've got neighbors' video. I've got repeated incidents." This isn't about style, it's about someone destroying property and then hiding behind the rules. People started talking, low at first, then louder. Someone shouted, "We saw her truck near Ethan's house at night." I didn't want to start rumors, I wanted facts, but I also knew how power works. It's easy to hide when folks don't look. The meeting fractured into two acts: the official HOA business, and the threat of people finally telling one another what they'd been holding back. Testimony came from 3 neighbors who'd had similar issues, small things at first, a letter here, a fine there, till people realized these were patterns. Frank Dalton, a retired Marine with a face you'd trust to shovel snow, recounted an incident where Linda's husband had threatened to cut down a tree that shaded his porch. Linda's expression hardened like wax. She tried to redirect, to point at bylaws, to make this about process again, but the room had shifted. That night a petition began to circulate quietly, then not so quietly. People were tired of being policed by someone who seemed to love the uniform more than the people in it. The board attempted to counter a few weeks of formal warnings, a proposed fine, but the tide had turned. We organized, we documented, we appealed in writing all the things Linda had asked of me. The difference was we did it as neighbors, not as a single person telling us we were wrong. At the recall vote, it wasn't a landslide, those never are, but it was decisive. Linda was out. The room exhaled like a town that had held its breath for too long. You might be wondering, was it cathartic? Yes, and also complicated. Linda packed up her clipboard like she was clearing out a life's work. Some of her supporters claimed we'd bullied her out. Others said she was using the rules to protect property values, and maybe she believed that. I can't read her heart. What I do know is this: the rules she loved were wielded in ways that felt personal, and when that happens in a small place, it corrodes trust. After the recall, things settled into a new normal. Mailboxes stayed put, oddly enough, but the bigger thing was conversation. People who'd been polite strangers started talking, trading stories about small cruelties that had piled up over the years. We started a simple neighborhood group to handle disputes, not to be a second HOA, but to keep lines open. That, to me, was the real victory. We learned to name the problem before it named us. But here's the twist that still sits heavy. Linda left convinced she was right. Some in the neighborhood still missed the order she brought, even if it came with a sharp edge. And I wonder, sometimes, if we won in a way that left something fragile like a reputation broken. The mailbox sits on its post, gleaming in the morning sun, but it's also a reminder that small fights can expose something larger. They can show you the quiet ways power moves, the way people mistake enforcement for virtue, the way a community can either harden or soften, depending on who's listening. If you've been through something like this, an argument where rules get tangled with personal grudges, where someone in power uses process as a club, I want to know how you handled it. Did you document everything? Did you go to the meeting, or let it slide? Was your neighbor right? Or was your neighbor protecting something important? Drop a comment below with your story. Tell me which side you think I was on, guilty of stubbornness, or just a guy who wanted his mail, and if you think the recall was fair. Share this if you've ever had a petty fight that turned serious, because there's probably somebody out there who thinks their mailbox is the most important thing in the world until it isn't.